Hang on just a moment, Alice. I'm just trying to sort through the utilities here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the RFC Editor's Future program. This is co-chaired by myself and Brian Rosen. By way of testing the tool, I'll ask Brian to say hello. Otherwise, we'll have some issues. Can people hear me? Let's see here.
Doesn't have his microphone connected. Note that there's a separate video and audio stream. So Brian, you need to click on the rightmost button underneath your profile picture that shows a microphone with a play button.
I'm not sending video. Would people like me to send video? I'm happy to send video. I know that sometimes the people complain because it uses too much bandwidth, and I don't want to be. Yes, more video. Okay. If people find that the video is too much, please let me know. All right. Hopefully you can see me in my lovely work area. And all right. So hopefully Brian will catch up. It's a tooling experiment for everybody this week, and I hope that we're all able to figure out how to manipulate things. And as you guys are pretty much almost all senior to me and have probably been in a bunch of these things before, I know you won't be shy in telling me what to do when I need to do it if I can't quite get it right, okay? Before we begin, I need some help. We did not receive any volunteer requests for note-taking or minute-taking, and I wonder if somebody could just shout out in the chat room that they would, be willing to participate, to take minutes. Let's see here. Nope, you apparently are not sending audio there, Brian. I'm not sure why not. So let's see here. Okay, I have a volunteer. Thanks, Braun. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, excellent. Let's see here. You need to click the send audio button. Let's see here. And I don't know if you're seeing the chat there, Brian. You must be seeing the chat because you chatted. Let's hope you are. Okay, so let's see here. We shall begin. And the way we begin with all these meetings, of course, is with a note well. Hello. Well, all right. No, we're beginning with a picture of the tomatina. This is an annual Spanish festival, which we're missing, unfortunately. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to go to Spain the next time. It occurs, roughly speaking, a little bit later than the IETF meeting was slated for. But this is a slide I've used previously, and sometimes I think it's reflective of the sausage-making process of standardization. And so hopefully today we won't have one of these, but you know, you've all been in one of those meetings, and so a welcome. And then here we do have the note well. Brian and I got to discuss a little bit about what we thought we wanted from this meeting early on when he joined. And Brian, as soon as you're able to join, just interrupt me and speak, okay? Oh, you asked to send audio. Okay, now great. How do I get him to do that? This would be the part where I need to find the right button for him. Let's see here. Where is Brian? Just a moment. People. Brian, where are you? How come Brian isn't even showing up on my thing here? Just
Sure, he should be able to send audio without a problem anyway. So
yeah. If I can hear you, Wes, I'm pretty sure we should be able to hear him. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. So let's see here. Yeah. All right, let's proceed, and then we'll just sort of make our way through this. And if somebody wants to try, and hopefully Brian will rejoin and have the necessary access. So yeah, it could be that he's having. That's a good point, Wes. Could be that he's having problems with connectivity. All right. So you all know the note well. Some of you know it better than me, and some of you probably had something to do with writing it. So we're going to proceed under the assumption that we know the note well. So we have the basic part of the agenda today. The overall goal is that we wanted to see if we could find a direction. There are clearly a number of points of view that people have shared, and we wanted to see, we wanted to test if we could pick the one direction and sort of travel in that direction in the process of in terms of trying to define a proposal. So video closed. Okay, my video got closed. Everybody probably, can you guys still hear me though? All right, I'm not, let's see.
Hear you.
Okay, you just can't see me. So I'm going to try sending video again. All right. All right, so you know, we've heard a lot from, we've had a couple of proposals that were written out. We've had a couple of good interim discussions, and this is it's an IAB program. Even though it's run like a working group, one of the things about IAB programs and IAB efforts in general is that they tend to look very far into the future, and also sometimes have very broad scope beyond what a working group would normally have. So that means that just that the problems that we're dealing with are a little bit more difficult to sort. And you know, that's why I think, you know, if it seems like we've taken a slow start and a little bit meandering, part of that is just in the way that our program is described. We have a very open mandate, and so we need to find our way a little bit. And we've had some really good we've had some really good discussions, you know, in terms of what people want, what their goals are. We've created a bit of a wiki here, and we documented some of those out. And so you know, we've had a lot of discussion about, you know, what along those lines. And the sole decision that I think we've come to, and it's not a perfect consensus, but a reasonable one, is a reasonably more than rough consensus, is that we've already decided that in the future, at least, as we write out whatever it is we write out, we know that the RSC will not have veto authority on documents. And so, well, congratulations, group. We've made one decision, actually, which is pretty good. And we've actually made a couple of more minor ones, which are more around, you know, should we establish the way we're operating and such like that. And we're now turning away from, you know, just problem definition a little bit toward, you know, can we pick a road and sort it. So, you know, we asked a bunch of questions, and this is, I think these are the ones that Brian asked, and we got a lot of feedback on the questions, actually, and which was good. That led to refined questions, so the refined questions were what you see here. So today, what we wanted to do was actually go through a lot of these questions, and we have a very, if you will say, abbreviated agenda. That is to say, everybody's had the opportunity to review this material for, you know, some number of weeks. We've had a lot of discussion, we're going to try to make use of the hum tool, which hopefully Brian will help out on once he catches up. Otherwise, everybody's going to help me a little bit in terms of how to go using this. And the goal is really just to hum along a couple of lines. We have enough time for a little bit of discussion on each point, but not a lot of time. I think the way Brian, and if you can type this into the chat, I think what we said was about 10 minutes or so per question, plus minus. If we get past the questions faster, then we can spend more time. And the idea is to based on the hums, and once they're confirmed on the mailing list, we would then try to develop proposals along the lines of the results of the hum. Let's see here. So that having been said, I just want to back up to the agenda for a moment because I forgot to do one thing, which is the top agenda item. And before we go any further, are people comfortable with sort of where we're going? I'll just open up do people feel the need to bash the agenda further? And I'm really hoping not, because this material has been out there, but if you feel the need to, please do. Okay, very good. Then, let's see here. Knowing that my mic is working, I'm assuming that everybody else's is except for Brian's. I've heard Wes. Let me just make sure that there's no... does anybody see any questions popping up in the queue? I don't see any, so I think we seem to be okay. All right, then let us proceed back. Let us travel forward on the slides. Right, so our first question, and I just want you to look at sort of the top half of the screen. Let's see, did people hear me when I sent audio? Apparently not. So do you have a this is Jared. I apologize, Jared. Let's see here. No, we did not hear you. Did anybody else hear you? Maybe it was me. Okay, no, Jared. All right. So I'm hearing. I think I heard Lucy there. Chime in. Good morning, Lucy, and thanks for joining at a very early hour for you, presumably. Or was it you? Okay, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hey.
All right. At least I got audio.
Okay. Did you have anything to say besides that?
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. I can do the hums. I got the hums.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Okay, so let us proceed forward. Let's see here. So our first question, we had some dialogue here on how is it that the RPC itself would be structured, and who actually is going to manage the RPC in the future. And today it pretty much runs through the ED. And then up to the LLC. And so there was some discussion of actually having somebody, that separately manages the RPC. Joel, can you talk or no? I see Joel has made a request.
So
Joel, go ahead.
There. So I was trying to actually use the queue procedure, requesting and waiting until it was granted rather than just grabbing it, which, yes, it works, but it's not good. There's an oddity in the way you phrase that, because currently the executive director doesn't, in a day-to-day sense, manage the RPC. AMS does that. So I just found the phrasing a little odd, so I wanted to request clarification.
Yeah, I think the intent here, and this is where we get our 10 minutes of discussion, is to be clear, number one, that there is going to be somebody other than the ED who is responsible for, who is separately responsible, I should say, for RPC management, apart from any strategic functions that we discuss later, right? That that there be a person who is responsible for managing and standing up for and in front of the RPC. Dave, go ahead, please.
Dave, go ahead.
In here in the hum, which is, should the RPC be managed by something that is specific to the IETF stream in the hierarchy, or should it be independent of stream, right? Because you could argue that the executive director is specific to the IETF stream. You might be able to argue that about LLC or whatever, but IAB you could argue is over all streams, as is the, in some sense, right, in terms of the program, as well as the current RSC is over all streams. And so I think part of this question about, is there a person other than the IETF executive director who manages the RPC for all streams would be a way of refining the question in a way that might become clear for some people's opinions.
Eric?
As such?
I mean, we're taking a position on what should or shouldn't happen. As a practical matter, the money is coming from the IETF LLC. And so as long as that continues to be the case, I don't see how the executive director can do other than manage the RPC in some sense.
Right. So thanks, Ecker, and good morning to you. Insert IETF before executive director. I think you mean this as such, right? Is that okay, Dave?
There is no IETF executive director. There's an IETF LLC executive director, correct?
As such. Stephen, go ahead.
So when you say manage, do you mean manage the contract, I think, as opposed to manage the people's holiday vacation forms and so on, right?
I think it's managing the deliverables and the day-to-day, both managing deliverables and day-to-day, actually.
That doesn't, yeah, I think Joel raised that. It doesn't, it seems more like managing the contract now. That's not a thing I've done, so I don't know the right words, but I'll defer.
Okay, Martin, please.
Oh, Joel's first.
I'm sorry, Joel. Why don't I see the queue? This is sort of weird.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, my point was the LLC executive director, Jay, manages the contract and has overall responsibility, but does not do day-to-day management, and nothing I've heard in any of the discussions on the list suggested that we wanted to task him with day-to-day management of the people on the RPC. That would be a major increase in his workload for no benefit.
Right,
So the question that's currently phrased looks completely wrong.
so
Not manages the RPC.
The question is, who does this job? Who stands in front of the RPC?
That's an AMS person. The person who manages the RPC is actually an AMS person. They are employees of AMS. And AMS is part of the contract. That's the contract with the ED. But the RPC is managed by the person who manages the RPC staff. And
Okay,
if you write it the way you've written it, it confuses this.
Okay, so Joel, the issue here is that when we talk, there was a lot of talk about project management, right? At the end of the day, is the project management owned by the ED or is it owned by AMS?
Projects within the RPC are currently managed by AMS. Projects that are outside of the RPC are currently managed in other ways. Now, the question of who AMS reports to about those projects historically has been the RSE, and there is some question that maybe it should be the ED, and I understand that question. But if you phrase it the way you have right now, I have no idea how to hum.
Okay, so give me better phrasing on this, if we can. The goal here is to establish who does the project management and the RPC management in particular. Maybe those are two separate things, but
We're running on our 10 minutes, and we have 3 people in queue.
So I'll let the other two speak, the other 3 people speak, because they may have a better idea than I do.
Martin.
okay. So is that Brian, by the way?
I think Joel nailed it there.
Go ahead, Mark.
And as I'm speaking, I don't know if I can be heard or not.
Yeah, you can be heard.
You can be. Okay, let's see here.
Christian? Ah, okay. Christian dropped. Lucy? Christian?
Okay.
Okay, does it work now?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah. There are 2 parts in the RPC, RSC work in practice. There's one part which is unstucking the RPC when there is a difficult editing decision to make. And that's what we tended to call the tactical part in the contract for John. But that's not exactly management, it's more advisory. There's another part which is setting performance goals for the RPC. And those performance goals are in terms of, say, how many pages are you supposed to edit in a month, how many RFCs, how long does it take, and things like that. Now, the relation is supposed to be today that the RSC sets those performance goals with discussions with the RSOC and whoever, and the LLC, and then, so setting the performance goal is one thing. The next thing is the RSC decides or makes a report regularly about whether the RPC is meeting those performance goals. And the thing which is really project management for me is that latter part. I mean, the RSC doing studies and reports to see that the RPC is meeting the performance goals. And that thing, in my mind, could be easily done directly between the LLC executive director and the RPC manager at AMS without taking the RSC in the loop. And that would lower the workload for the RSC, and that would make the contractual negotiation and contract enforcement much clearer.
So just I want you to restate again what you're saying, Christian, is so you have one part which is who sets performance goals for the RPC and holds them accountable. And
no, the hold them accountable that's the second part, is hold them accountable.
Okay. Okay.
And the performance goals are expressed in terms of defining the metrics of what the RPC shall do.
Okay. And so, are these 2 questions? Do people prefer these 2 questions as a manner to proceed? Let me put it another way. Are there those who would object to replacing the first question with the second 2 that I have highlighted? Mike St. John's, please. Good morning.
Go ahead, Mike. Uh-oh. There he goes.
All right, try again, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. Way too many buttons. Again, the RPC is a contracted entity. Once the contract is set, the management of that is solely on one side, the LLC and whoever they assign to manage the contract, and on the other hand, on the other side, it's whoever's managing the RPC people. So the performance goals are set in the contract with community input. Holding them accountable is solely a contract management thing. There really isn't a question here. Unless unless the RPC is some flavor of volunteer organization that we're just folding in amongst everything else. So.
Okay, before you go, Bob, Kristen, do you want to comment back on that point?
I would agree that that's what it should be in theory. That's not what's happening in practice, because in practice, the performance goals have to change over time based on circumstances. For example, as a consequence of doing the new format work that happened, it happened mid-contract for the RPC, and then the work changed. And so in practice today, the RSC was tasked in revising the performance goal of the RPC while the contract was going on. Now, you may say, Mike, that it is poor contract management, and I would give that some credit, but that's what happens today. I think it should be I personally agree with Mike, it should be much clearer. I mean, the community, the RSC, whoever, gives input to the LLC about what performance goals shall be in the contract, and then the LLC executes the contract.
Bob Hendon, you had a comment?
Hi. So I think the questions are confusing, because I think there's clearly the LOC manages the contract. Some of the things in the contract are more policy that are probably not created by the LLC. So I think trying to capture this in this way, there's not really a question. As both I think Christian and Mike have said, you know, there's not a question here to hum. It's the words need to be more accurate to map what we're actually trying to do here.
Okay, so I think what I've heard is that there has been confusion in the past about this, and there's been some debate as to the role of the RSC. You'll notice that the RSC's name has not yet appeared here. Right, so the first question is, right, it sounds like what we have is people would like to essentially maintain the process of the community giving input into how the RPC is run. This is what essentially what Christian said. Is there any debate about that point at this point? Lucy, please. Oops. Brian, I think you might be pushing the buttons that clear people off the queue before they talk.
I thought I was giving them the cue. That's what I normally do. I did it.
Try again. All right.
There we go.
Go ahead, Lucy. Good morning.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I actually think you have a cart and horse problem here, and that you're trying to solve a down in the weeds management problem without fully talking about the role of the RSC and the role of the RPC and the various streams before you get to how you're going to twiddle the knobs that let you control the contract.
So thank you for the comment. This was meant to be sort of a warm-up question, and it's clearly warmed things up a bit more than we intended. But if people don't believe we can answer this, we're going to move on.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that we have a question that we're agreeing to, and I don't think we're going to get there. And I think people think that we're in the weeds, and so let's just move on.
Okay.
Just not something we need to answer right now.
Okay. All right, just a moment. So the next question is more around, this is shorthand for the discussion we've been having, right? Which is, and this is not, we're going to need to wordsmith the question now that I look at it a little bit more, which is unfortunate, but there it is. We have, we've had some discussion about how the RFC series should be managed over time. And should there be a board a la an RSOC or something like that? A standing working group very much similar to what we have here, right, or a program very much. A combination of the two as a means for overseeing the strategic direction of the series. Russ, please.
I think that we already have the stream managers and that they make up this, and I don't think that's what you mean by board, and therefore I don't think any of these choices tell us that.
Well, let's add another one, other. As such, Russ? Try again. Oh, he's gone.
From the queue, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, try again, Russ, if you can.
Why it's under other, but other than that, it's fine.
No, we can do this. Uneasy. Okay, so let me make clear the question just so that we're.
While you're doing that, Russ, Joel, go ahead.
I was about to ask, did he clarify the question? So he's doing so. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Is that about the right question?
Well, get rid of the options. Just who addresses the ongoing strategy, and the possibilities are those.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the questions. Let's give a few minutes for comment, right? There was discussion about the stream managers. We've talked about this being a standing group. There are other people who would like a board. Mike put forward a proposal along those lines. And then let me just say.
Michael, go ahead.
Thanks. Obviously, the one thing that we're missing here is the RSC. So part of the process, there may be a combination of them, and I think a professional RSC is still one of the things we want to thinking about here.
We're getting there.
It's part of this question. So
okay, so your one's thinking could be that you have a person who does all of this ongoing strategizing and not a work group. So that's a fair point, Mike. And then the question will then turn to how that person is managed, right? But let us assume for the moment that if there is a person, that person would report to one of these. And Mike, is that fair? Or at least dotted line to one of these?
no, not actually. Again, same argument with respect to the RPC. This is a contractor. The management of the contract and the contractor comes under the LLC. The relationship of the program comes under this. This doesn't give this group of people the right to tell whoever you hire as the RSC what to do on a day-to-day basis. This is a group of people that helps with the ongoing strategy for the RFC series itself. Okay, if there is a problem with the person or whatever we end up in that space, then it is an LLC problem, and an LLC, and it gets handled under contract rules, not under random people deciding that it's a bad idea that this person is doing X, Y, and Z.
Martin.
Okay. Yeah.
We got people in the queue. Let
So
them talk.
I'm having trouble with what your requirements are. Yeah. Can you state the requirements that you're trying to address by filling this hole? I think this is the problem.
It's who does strategy for the series. Sorry, who addresses ongoing strategy for the RFC series?
Mark?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Good evening.
Good evening. Actually, good morning. So I'm having trouble separating some aspects out of this question. To me, this mixes in the notion of how we determine the strategy and how open that process is. So, presumably, if it's a person, that person could just make the decision themselves and walk away, or they could consult the community widely, or they could be held accountable somehow. This doesn't speak to that. If it's a board, it could be a board in secret that has secret meetings and never reports to the community, or it could be a very open process. A working group obviously is more open. I think that's more accountable, and that's why I would be tilted towards that. But I don't know if you want to conflate these things or whether you want to separate them.
I'm not sure what you mean by conflate or separate, Mark. I understand that. I think your point is, and let me see if I can restate it, which is that if you have anything other than the working group or an open working group, then you have to explore the accountability of each of these individuals. Would that be the fair statement?
Not only accountability, but also, how it interacts with the rest of the community. It's not just, the sort of Damocles, it's also, do they take input from the rest of the community? And if so, how? And is that input in the open or is it secret? It's transparency. Thank you, Rich.
And how much of that should we decide in advance? Right, that's
I think quite a bit, personally.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out.
We got more people in the queue.
I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah, I mean, so I personally think that there needs to be a group. There should be a group, but it's not. It's then there's the question of who's in the group. Like probably should have the stream managers. It should have the RSE. The RSE is probably the chair of the group. The group needs to have some procedures about how it resolves issues. So this is not the right, I think we want to, there needs, and it probably needs to have some community representation.
That was the notion of the board. You're describing what we said when we said a board.
Okay, but I can't read that into that on the slide. So, but this is, so I think that if these are supposed to be choices on the screen, then, I'm not sure we're getting there. I mean, I think what Mike proposed and the thing he wrote up a while back was pretty close. At least to what makes sense to me. Obviously, the details are going to get worked out.
So just trying to explain what we thought we were doing. We thought we were trying to deal with whether there is some kind of board that has people that is relatively long-lived, but there's a small number of people who are appointed in some form, either by office or by non-com or whatever. Or is there a working group? Or is there a person? And really, stream managers is a board with a very limited participation. So you could think stream managers is a runt case of board if you want. But that was the idea. Is it a work group? Is it some body that we constitute, or is it something else, or is it the RC or some equivalent of the RC? That's the question we're trying to figure out. Who does strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the trouble I have with when you call it a board, I think of like the LLC board or the ISOC board of trustees, and I don't think it's quite. I think it's a bit more operational than that.
Okay. Poor choice of words. Got a better word? It's a group, an appointed group.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but
okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a committee, but.
Eric.
So I mean, I think it'd be helpful at some point to be clear on what we think strategy means here. As an observer of this process, it seems not this particular process, but the overall RFG process is notably quite slow moving from my strategy perspective. I guess perhaps I think part of the problem is the use of the word addresses here. Because as far as I can tell, the last major thing we did actually had like pretty wide participation, maybe the XML thing, and wasn't just like, wasn't just driven by some small set of people at the end of the day. So let me open for comment. So, I guess so, in that case, there's a concept perhaps of leading the strategic conversation versus the concept of how the strategic conversation happens. I don't see how one can make like major changes to like we can't even figure out how to make major changes to like the organization of the system without having like an open discussion. So I can't imagine making major change like the system as a whole without an open discussion. So I don't think the question so much necessarily who sets the strategy, because all of these sort of things that are like, wow, we have some closed small group that makes those decisions are like unacceptable. It's who is responsible for driving that conversation. And that question then is, I think, how much you already in a working group setting.
Okay, I have a question, which is, has anybody who spoke, did they actually get to see the slides in advance or the questions in advance? Because that's, we sort of have a question that follows along those lines. And so maybe there's too much packed into the chair's heads that we shorthanded things just a bit too much, right? Which is, the presumption is that somebody has to either address or oversee, if you would prefer the word, right, or actively participate in the development of the strategy for the series. And so that would be either a small group of people, and and the reason I'm a little nervous about person being here, right, is that we have this other question that's sort of hanging out there, right, which is there a need for a thought leader who can run a community, who can drive the community to answer some of these questions. And that thought leader could be responsible to a committee in terms, or at least the purpose of that person would be to essentially drive the discussion, right? And then for either the committee to make a decision, a working group to make a decision, stream managers to make a decision. I'm not sure about a person making a decision, but putting this into context, does that at least provide a bit more clarity as to what we thought were sort of the decision points we were hearing from the discussion? And Mike?
Yeah, there we go. Eric, do you have something to say at this point for this? I can't hear you.
He was asking me.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Eric. Go on.
Well, yeah, we got other people in the queue.
Fine.
Colin's there. Yeah, let Colin go.
Okay.
Hi. I was going to say, I think we need to be clear what type of committee is meant. I mean, Mike certainly had one proposal which has some merits and some problems. I think you could argue that the existing RSOC is a committee. I'm not sure that people would necessarily want that to continue as the body for this role. You could also argue the IAB would be a committee, and I'm sure you could think of many different models as well. So saying a committee, I think, would depend on what type of committee and how it was constituted and what were its terms of reference and so on. So I think it's a bit general to hum on, do we want a committee to run this?
So the reason, Colin, just stick with us for a moment. The reason we asked the question at the general level was that the next step would be to ask exactly that question. Okay, let's see if we can come up with the sort of committee that people would be happy with. And let that be a working item as the next step, right? Which all of these things are rather general and would require further development as the next step. This is not, just as you said, there could be many different types of a committee. Does that clarify it for you a bit?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we're not predetermining the outcome of how that committee works at this stage.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Michael?
Oh, hi. Yeah, you were talking about the XML stuff as sort of one of those things that's sort of strategy. And the strategy was actually, do we change, the strategic question was actually, do we change from our reference implementation being text to something else? The implementation of that turned out to be, yeah, we'll pick up the XML we were already doing. And then the actual implementation of that was a combination of a good XML person plus the guidance of the RSE, plus various other folks talking about the vocabulary, if you will. So I wouldn't stick your. I would try and sort of go up another 1,000 or 2,000 feet when you're thinking about strategy here. Okay.
Okay, Wes?
So, I'm torn, right? This discussion is incredibly important, but one of the things that I think that this group really needs to concentrate on is, one, making a decision fast enough, and I think we could spend a lot of time on this. And we are in the process of designing a committee as a committee, so it's really committees all the way down at this point. And how do we avoid the mistakes of the past, which specifically came out of a committee in the first place that didn't work out well. So I don't have an answer out, but I'm just warning you that this looks like a rather large time sink to not make a whole lot of progress forward on the bigger picture.
This seems to me, this is Brian, that it seems to me we're really trying to more eliminate options, not eliminate options, but at least concentrate our discussions in a small number of areas instead of having everything up in the air. So if we think that this is something that someone like an RSE does, fine. If we think that it's something that is a work group who does it, fine. And if we think there's some other group of people who does it, fine. And then we can talk about, and we don't have to decide today who that entity is. We're trying to, if it isn't the RSE, that's a good thing to know, that there's some other larger group of people, right? So help us out in trying, instead of answering the question, think of it in terms of not eliminating, but at least concentrating our discussion in a smaller number of places. We're currently all over the map. We're trying to figure out if there's a sense of the group of what direction we should go, not make a decision. Michael.
And if there is an RSE, and that's a big if, right? There's still a whole question about that. That person would presumably at least either lead or either lead this committee or have a big role in terms of this of facilitating the establishment of the strategy, and maybe even help operationalize some of it. Is the thinking.
So it's actually one of the things we were getting confused about here. It's basically a committee of experts as opposed to the working group standing program where anybody can join. So you may want to just tag that particular thing, or at least that's what I'm thinking of it as.
It could be, right? Experts could be part of the committee, could be community members, right? It's the composition of the committee, right, itself is something to be decided.
No, what I'm saying is there's a big difference between a committee of experts and a committee of random people joining just because they have an interest. So,
Yes,
and that's what the working group standing program might be closer to, whereas what we're generally thinking about are people who are the stream managers, tied into a need to advocate for what they need from their streams, as opposed to a working group standing program where random people come in, spend 5 minutes throwing things at stuff and then leave. So that's why I'm just saying, I think what you're looking there is a committee of experts for the first one, and then a different type of committee maybe is really quite a different thing.
Okay. I think I do think we have a pretty clear choice here, right? But things need to be worked out, right? Either we have a committee that's going to oversee this, or we have pretty much an open working group, right? These are and by the way, or we have a person.
Oversee,
and,
please.
Sorry.
Phil.
Oh, yeah. I'm really upset with what's going on at the moment because I've been shouted down by people who call themselves experts, and I raised some very simple issues about the SVG spec. At the moment, we are forced to use a standard for SVG that isn't actually a standard, isn't supported anywhere. And every time I try to raise this, I was told, oh, it's already been decided. The experts have spoken. And then when I actually did some diving through the list, I found nothing of the sort had happened. But I was being fobbed off all the time by, oh, you're not an expert. Phil, you have no knowledge at all of the web.
All right. So, yeah, Phil, thanks for the comment. Certainly, it isn't good when people claim that things were done that weren't. The chairs are sitting here chatting in the background. We do want to call this particular question, right? And the way we want to do it, I think, is we're going to give sort of 3 choices to see if we can resolve some of this as a starting point, not an ending point, right? The idea is, how should we focus our work as we move forward, with the assumption that A, there will be a committee, B, there will be there'll be an open working group, or C, there will be a person. And if there's a person that's managing this, right, then that means that the next step is that there'll need to be some sort of or actually for each of these, right, there would have to be some sort of proposal made that furthers any of this. Does that make sense? Eric, do you want to, I'm sorry, Brian, do you want to comment?
Bob first, then Eric.
Well, you first, actually. Did I describe that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. I'm trying to cut down options, make it simple, something we can actually get a hum out of. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the question that Brian asked a little while ago, so I think as it is now, at least specified in the RFCs, it should be the RFC series editor who is the lead on the strategy for the RFC series. How they implement that, whether there's probably people behind them, around them, in a bunch of different roles we can talk about later, but I think the simplest answer for this, it's the RFC series editor.
Okay, thanks. Eric? Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this seems like a little premature hum-wise. This discussion's been all over the place. And I understand the chair's going to want to prune, but the idea that we're going to like have 15 minutes of discussion and then hum on part one, maybe the most important question, that seems misguided.
Eric, if we could if the hub shows that everybody wants the RFC, then we've learned something. If the hum shows that we're 30-30-30, then we've learned something else. We're just trying to figure out if there's any consensus within the work group at all, right? We're all over the map. We're trying to get to the point where instead of everybody having 25 opinions, we're down to a smaller number. You don't think that that's worthwhile at this point, or possible? Is even a better question.
I think it's premature.
Okay.
Okay. Let me ask the question. First of all, do people agree with Eric? If people think we're premature, then we will step back and continue the discussion. It will take a while, right? Sometimes these things do, and I think we're going to have to step up our interim meetings so that we get some more face-to-face time to actually try and develop the concepts that people want to put forward as alternatives. So
all right,
just
let's do a simple hum on can we ask this question? Yes or no?
Now,
let's do that.
This will be the trick where, Brian, you have to manage the hum tool.
I got it.
Okay.
Wait a minute. It does not allow, no. Come on, give me a, somehow there's a hum running and I didn't do anything, didn't type anything. It'll be over shortly. Learning to use the tool, sorry. I haven't practiced this particular one and I thought I got it right.
Hum softly or loudly or whatever you want.
Yeah, right. Don't worry. It'll be over shortly. All right, start a new hum. No, there's no question.
Using audio, or you have to write it into the slide.
The spec is that you ask the question out loud and then you turn on the hum.
All right, so I will let this go. I played this, and I've clearly forgotten in the 4 days that I did this. All right, so the hum on the line is, are we ready to answer this question? So yes means we're going to run that three-way hum. No means we're going to move on. Okay? Is that everybody clear on the question? Rich.
So we're going to do two hums?
Yeah, no. Well, we're going to do one hum, and now then, depending on that, we're not going to do another one. If we're not ready, we're just going to move on.
Brian, the hum tool doesn't work that way.
Well,
because
all we're going to do is the hum is yes or no. Yes.
The hum tool doesn't work that way.
So now you got to ask. What's the question is? Yes. The hum will be for answering the question,
and then another hum for not answering, because that's the only thing you can compare with this hum tool.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry, I understand your point. I understand your point. It is the way we can. The only way we can do it. Yes. So we will run two questions: a hum for yes and a hum for no. Are we now clear on what we have? All right. So, for those who think we're ready to try to run this three-way question, please hum now. All right, that was a piano mid thing. So now we're going to ask the no. No, we're not ready to do this. So if you don't think we're ready to move to answer this three-way question, hum now.
Dun, 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 Hope that's okay for you there, Pete.
Even less. So we got a middling answer, and I think it's given.
Hang on a second, Brian. It's the other way around.
Long the other way around, right? It's slightly stronger for not doing it.
Okay.
It was piano versus forte, right?
Yeah.
Now what do you want to do?
Well, that's the question. So it seems to me like we need to develop this question quite a bit more, right? Which is
yes.
Right, and what I guess what we'll do is let's spend a little bit of time, because it seems to me that mostly this is our work here.
Yeah.
And so what we can do is propose an alternative, which is that we allow for fleshed out proposals even along lines A, B, and C at the same time. And that might address some of the key aspects like accountability, visibility, participation, and allow those to mature. So for instance, if Mike, you wanted to mature your proposal, or if Martin, you wanted to mature a proposal that looks at a working group or standing proposals, and I'm just naming people who have taken various positions, but anybody is welcome to. And Neville has participated in this, and Brian has put forward a draft as well, Brian Carpenter. Maybe we can try that as another example of a hum. Brian Rosen, what do you think?
I don't think I think we don't have a good answer. I think as you said, we should work on this and try and come up with a way of determining, cutting down the number of options, and moving forward. I mean, you know, we don't know. The answer is we don't know. So we'll just keep going.
Okay.
It's okay to not know.
Yeah. Let's open the floor, though, then, perhaps for ways to take the discussion forward. Right. Right now, it seems to me people find, if you thought this was premature and you were the ones who hummed in the forte category, maybe you could talk about how you would like to get to a decision point. Right. The chairs would love, you know, what we're going to do after all of this is Brian and I, and you know, maybe our IAB advisors will reconnoiter and try and find ways forward. But now is a good time. We have the time. If people would like to contribute their thoughts, you've hummed that you're not ready for this answer. So what would lead us in that general direction, and how would you like to proceed?
Martin.
I would like to understand what our requirements are for strategy in a little bit more detail. I've had a lot of people talk about various mystical, magical things about publishing.
So Martin, would nailing down requirements be your desire? Okay, I'm going to ask you to just clarify a little bit more, because I'm trying to understand what the chair's role here is. How do we drive the discussion based on this? So, say you say you'd like to understand the scope. Do you want to have a scope discussion about the program, the role, the the role of the RSC, the role of a committee or a working group. Say a few more words about that. Okay.
Okay.
Others? Next.
Colin. Colin, go ahead.
Hi. So I think Martin said something very similar to what I was going to say. I think part of my concern here is we seem to be trying to define solutions before we have a consensus understanding of what is the problem we're trying to solve.
Michael? Go ahead, Mike.
Hi. Sorry. We've got worked examples of basically one expert sort of driving and managing the process of evolution. Anything that changes that model is going to have to we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it and manage it in some way, shape, or form. So with respect to requirements, generally I don't actually know how you get to the point of nailing down the requirements, because, for example, we have a brand new requirement that seems to have popped up in the last 4 days or 5 days related to language. I don't know if that's part of the RSE process, but that is something that is going to probably need to be managed for our documents at some point. So
Mike, just to follow up, help us out a little bit here. What do you see as next steps here? How would you narrow get to the point where we think we can make some decisions about direction? What would be your preference?
All right. Well, I mentioned before that way back when that we get into this sort of consensus paralysis process. And with respect to strategy, sometimes having one person who has the, if you will, veto or the power to just push gets us forward. And sometimes that's a strong chair for a working group. Sometimes in this particular case, it's the RSC that we hire and we give that imprimatur to. With respect to how we do this is we need to look at, are there places where we're going to end up with this road log jam or roadblock, and how do we get past it? And I don't know how to do that without basically sort of saying, yeah, we're gonna hire someone who is who has the dynamite to break the log jam. So
okay,
thanks.
Eric.
Sort of echo what I thought I heard Martin and Colin saying. I'd like to understand like what actual substantive problems we think will need to be solved in the next 5 years. Now that won't be a complete list, but it will be a partial list. And if it's a null set, well, that would be very interesting, because I think that would help us understand what kind of structure is required to solve those problems.
Thanks. Rich. Go ahead, Rich.
UI problem. No, sorry, I'm off the queue.
Okay. Stephen.
Yeah, I'm less comfortable with the idea of treating this as a requirements analysis, because I think it's not necessarily possible to identify such requirements or for strategy for something as nebulous as the RFC series ahead of time, which I think is likely to bias us towards ending up with something close to the null set, which then goes to the set of people who have the position. We don't really need an RFC. So I'm not sure that saying the right next thing that will determine where to go is a requirements analysis. If there are requirements, it's useful to know about those, but I suspect it'll be too nebulous.
Okay, great, thanks. Larry? Ah, what happened? If I knocked you out, Larry, I didn't mean to. There we go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, I just wanted to concur about thinking. Seems like we've been thinking about the problem from the top down, thinking about it from the bottom up. One of the things that the RC in the past has done for each of those, how much work and what kind of skills does it require? Could it be done better, and what kind of skills would be required to do it better? Just to get a better handle on what the past has been, and as a way of scoping out the overall problem.
Okay, so you're suggesting that one next step would be to do a skill set review of any potential RSC?
Well, in particular, what are the tasks involved? Not just in general, but editing RFCs, applying language, managing the XML transition, and what are all of the things that you really expect out of the RSC before you can figure out whether or not you need a committee or somebody else could do the job, or other things about it, just to break down the work.
Okay, so thank you. First of all, if you look at the screen, if I didn't capture what you thought you said in a succinct form, please take the floor now and correct me. So I don't want to misstate anybody in any way. So if I have this wrong, now's the time to say something. Otherwise, yes, Stephen, please go on.
Yeah, so it wasn't trying to express a lack of thrill. I'm often thrilled about lots of things. My concern is that requirements analysis might bias us towards getting a null set outcome, which implies no need for an RSE, which appears to be the choice of or preference of some, but not all of the people involved in this discussion.
All right, so Stephen, let me turn it around and say, do you have a recommendation for a next step?
I suspect getting better fleshed out proposals for what to do about the whole thing might be more practical if we can get a set of those, and if people are willing to discuss variations on them. I kind of think people know what they want as outcomes here, and what's not clear is how you get them to agree on something that's not exactly what they start out with.
Thank you.
Lucy?
I want to respond to something that Elliot said back at the top of this next steps process, where he said that the chairs would go back to the IAB and discuss the program.
No, excuse me, Lucy.
But this is not an IAB program. This is a community program housed within the IAB structure. And I would appreciate it if, when you go back to consult with people, you also consult with the current stream editors and some other folks. Because I do.
Yeah, it's only let me clarify that.
Elliot, let me finish. I believe there's a group driving hard here towards a no RSC solution. And there's another group who think there needs to be some tweaks made to the current RSC model. And I think the way you're currently driving this, the null set is a likely outcome, as Stephen said, and that would be an unsatisfactory outcome, at least for me. Thank you.
Okay, so let me note your comment first of all.
And Lucy, your audio output is very low. It's very hard to hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Very low volume.
Okay. First of all, 2 points. Point number one is we have 2 IAB advisors. They're listed on the program, and they do not have a decisional role. We just use them to bounce ideas back and forth, and that's it. Right? They have never told us to do anything. Right? And they're both on the call, and you can confirm this with them, and you know these people well. Second, the chairs are not actually, we haven't picked a direction. We did not really anticipate that people would be unhappy with even holding the hum. So this is not an area that we expected. So there's no bias on our part in terms of which mechanism we would prefer. And we are mindful of Stephen's point and your point. We're also mindful of the comments that everybody else made. We just haven't, obviously we're not in a position to process them on the spot and make recommendations to the group as to how best to proceed. That's why we're taking a point. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, clearly we're all flailing a little bit, but that's kind of the nature of the game. It's not particularly surprising that we're still flailing a bit. I've heard several good suggestions for how to move forward, and we're writing down all our notes here, and we'll figure out what we think we ought to do as chairs. Of course, the mailing list is very active and should remain active as you all contribute your ideas. Bob, you wanted to talk?
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, this feels to me like second system syndrome, trying to look at everything and do everything we never did, and those usually fail. I'm confused as to why we aren't looking at the current practice. It's defined in a bunch of RFCs, and see what incremental changes we want to make, or what issues there are that might be a lot more productive than just trying to ask all of these basic questions. Because just stepping back a bit, to my take is that the reason we're doing this is because we had a problem with the way the IAB was running the RSOC. We weren't having a problem with the RFC series, as far as I can tell. And so another way of doing this is, let's just look at the current practice and figure out what, think about this as a BIS, and what changes do we want to make, and we do need to take into account that it is a running system. We're not starting from, this is not just a conceptual idea. We have to continue publishing RFCs.
Okay, that's a great thing to think through. Thank you, Michael.
I think actually Lucy hit it right on the head, that one of the things that this discussion is actually doing is we still need an RFC versus no, an RFC is not in our future set of discussions. So perhaps going with what Bob's talking about, I actually agree with his approach. If you want to get to the point, if you've got folks who don't want an RFC in there, we need some description of what the model might look like if that's going to be the case, rather than just, we hate this we think this is a bad idea. How do you work it without the RFC? So that would be the other piece of the other piece of this puzzle here. Rather than requirements, tell us what it looks like without an RFC.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think I'm just going to say that you're +1ing Mike, Lucy, and Bob. Is that fair?
You didn't actually count. You didn't actually put in what Lucy said, which was that we're having a discussion about having an RFC or not having an RFC, and that Bob on the RFC side is saying, what are the incremental changes that we need to make? And on the other side, it's what's the model without an RFC? And that's the detail that we would need to actually have that real discussion. So we have a lot of information about how to use how an RSC would work. We don't have a lot of discussion how it would work without an RSC.
Because I think so I think actually first of all, thank you for your comment. I think I'm hearing actually that's a very sort of binary view, which we like binary in this world, right? Because we know how to handle binary. We can take two directions, right? We can say, okay, if we're going with an RSC, then we do some incremental. We get an incremental proposal based on what we think would correct what we think went wrong, as one direction, versus what I hear from a few others, right, which is, well, this is an opportunity really to do away with the RSC. So now that opportunity, if you will, is to flesh out, what the world would look like if I'm restating your position correctly. Here is a cheerful problem that I foresee happening, and we'll I think as a group we're going to have to be mindful that if the chairs could say, go forward and let's develop both of those approaches, right? Let's see what they would both look like and maybe compare and contrast them. And we can do that, and I think it might be a useful exercise. The concern that I have that may come to fruition in a really bad way is that we still are not able to find consensus points. And maybe we should just be brave and allow that possibility, right? So and which, by the way, is something that happens from time to time. And so one of the things we can do is allow for both of those ways to go forward. Richard? Hey, there you are. I can almost hear you, but not quite.
Multi-phase commit is important. We wouldn't want to have people accidentally getting in the queue here, accidentally setting both media streams when they didn't intend to. I was just going to suggest that a lot of the confusion here seems to be around exactly what problem we're solving here. So much though I'm usually loath to write problem statement drafts, this actually seems like one where getting written down some of the issues that people have with the current program could be useful in terms of focusing discussion, kind of like what Bob suggested, because I think that will point toward what the changes are that are necessary here.
So what's interesting about that, right, is we did spend the first couple of months of this program talking about that. What I don't think we got, what we ended up with was, I think, very diverse perspectives about what people would, think needs to, that we had essentially requirements-focused effort along the Martin Mark view, Martin Mark Ecker as a couple of people along those views, versus sort of a more narrow, a more tailored or evolutionary view from some other people. Richard, you want to respond back? Sorry.
I'm a big fan of pain-oriented engineering. Where are we feeling pain and how can we fix it? So I think maybe I'm more on that kind of Ecker, Martin sort of train. I think, there are ideals that one might try and live up on, and there are things that are concretely causing problems for the organization, that are reducing participation, that are wasting people's time. So I think getting especially those things written down, especially those pain points like that, those I think are the things where we're likely to find energy to drive solutions.
Okay, so I think we're actually going to be coming down to the wire in terms of time. Does anybody else want to contribute on add their names to this list in one way or the other in terms of how next to proceed? Because the chairs do need to reconnoiter a little bit and come up, because there's another question that I want to ask after this under the any other business category. Any other comments or thoughts on these before going once? Lucy, go ahead.
Phil?
Sorry.
No. Okay.
So
Go.
the list of my question. It's not having a discussion about a discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. It's me typing while not thinking. Discussion.
Thank you.
Hang on a second. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was concentrating on more than one thing. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I was just going to comment here that one of the things I keep hearing whenever documents, the document process comes up is that people start off by saying, oh, it's hard. Oh, we've got these archival, make it available in 1,000 years' time criteria you absolutely must meet, and so on. And so what I see happening is a whole load of really absurd requirements being thrown down, and then people saying, oh, we don't know how to solve them, so we must have an expert. And then somebody raising their hand saying, well, I'm an expert, and then taking control of everything. And I think that sort of mode of discourse keeps coming in here, because this isn't something that is central to, the very few of us who are actually people who spend their time thinking about archive and document series and publishing and all that stuff. And so we don't think of ourselves as experts. But if we just shuffle it off saying, well, that's hard, we end up with nothing. Or worse, we end up with a process that has a block in it that you can't ever progress from because, well, we're not expert.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I'm hearing what you think the next step should be out of all that, though. All right, I'll take your comment as a comment then at this point. All right, I think our next steps are for the chairs to look at this information. Obviously, we should take this to the list for discussion. I think the chairs might be able to organize what we have on the screen here a little bit more into several different paths as I discussed. And then what I think we'll do is we'll communicate back onto the list on that. Brian, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think we got our work cut out for us, and I encourage list participation as always. Trying to get somewhere instead of having a zillion ideas on the table and not getting rid of any of them.
Right. So there's one. Then we had one question which I think also we need to put off. So I'm gonna skip forward, as you can see, or skip backwards. Right. So we had this question. We're going to put that off for the moment, I think, because I think this stuff needs to be resolved first. And in terms of how people are thinking. And then we also said we were going to ask for a doc editor. I think we need to put that off just a little while too until we understand what's going on here. We might need several doc editors, and we might want them to self-organize. And this is a discussion we'll continue on the list. I think there's another question which is more logistical. It seems to me that this group would work better if we could establish a tempo of virtual discussions. Do people agree or disagree on that point? I mean, do people want to comment? Because the chairs are more than happy to schedule some time virtually so that people can hash things out as they're making progress. These can be interim points of discussion. It doesn't have to be like we're always going to be deciding the most important thing at every meeting. Would people like us? Would people like the chairs to work on making sure we have some time scheduled, and we will continue the rotation of pain, if you will, if we do that. Otherwise, absent that, we will wait until there's more demand on, or we perceive more demand for the meetings on the list. But now's an opportunity to say, yeah, go make sure we get some time scheduled. Comments?
There's a comment on the list that basically is we meander too much to have a useful meeting, a useful virtual meeting. we don't get things done, so people don't want to spend time at a meeting getting things done. So I understand that. I understand that.
Okay, then we will, for the moment, not schedule time, just so that we're clear. The chairs will review all of this. We'll try and come up with a couple of ways forward and bring them back to the list. Any other, so I think we're at the any other business point of the discussion. Does anybody have any other business?
I think not.
Okay, then thank you for your participation. We will be back to you on the list, and thank you, Braun, for taking meetings, for taking minutes rather, and we'll see you on the list.
Thanks.